Hey GED students, I'd like to introduce you to your new bestie. That's the TI-30XS Multiview calculator, and you get it on most of the math tests. In fact, the vast majority of the math tests. You get it on the science and you get it on the social studies. Knowing how to use it is going to raise your score in all three areas. In my experience, most GED classes and GED books make you start with what they call basic math, and what they mean by that is adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with different types of numbers like decimals, percents, negatives, and fractions. And you're going to find that we are not going to start that way. Why? Well, when I write my tell-all expose about exactly what's wrong with math education, I always joke that chapter 2 is going to be about how basic math might not be so basic after all. We are not doing you a favor if we start with teaching you that math is all about memorizing steps. Math is really all about reasoning and logic, and luckily that's the type of test the GED is. It's a mathematical reasoning test, not a computation test. And so we're not going to learn how to do all those computations with all those numbers right away. Where we're going to start is with that mathematical reasoning. And so what will we do when you need to do a computation? Well, we're going to pick up our calculators. So this is the TI-30XS Multiview, and this is the official GED calculator. Okay, now I know you all have trust issues with your math teachers, right? I say, please order a TI-30XS Multiview, and you say, nah, Kate, I got a cell phone. Please, don't use your cell phones when you're prepping for the GED. I mean, if you just have to add, subtract, multiply, or divide regular numbers, okay, not that big of a deal. But you need to know how to input all the other things, percents and fractions and such, into your GED calculator, and it works really different from your phone calculator. Okay, so order the GED calculator. Now, be really careful, because a lot of you guys go into like these big box stores that I won't name any names, rhymes with Walmart. Anyway, they don't often carry the right calculator. They carry this similar one, the TI-30XS2. It's not allowed on the test, and it does operate differently. So please don't buy that version. If you can't find the TI-30XS at your local store, just go ahead and order it online. We have some important calculator skills to learn. Let's talk about changing modes. The three big modes that I want to talk about that are useful for the GED are Math Print and Classic. We can switch back and forth between those two. And then the scientific mode. We can switch our calculator from normal to scientific mode in certain situations. So let's go look at how to do that. When will you want to change modes? Well, it depends really on what kinds of numbers that you're working with. So let's go ahead and look at the different modes. So in order to see them, hit the mode key. And there's only two lines you care about. The second line, we can flip between normal and scientific mode. And the fourth line, the last line, we can switch between classic and math print. So right now I'm in my normal, what I would like to be in. I'd like to be in normal mode, math print. That's usually the most useful for GED style problems. But I will just point out that classic mode works more like the kind of calculators that you're used to, gives decimal answers, does one step at a time. So if you'd like to get into classic mode, you just arrow over to the word classic, press enter to select it, and then clear to get out of that screen. So when you type square roots, for example, on this type of problem, like let's look at the square root of 7, you are going to end up with decimal answers like your phone. Whereas if you are in the standard math print mode, so I'm going to arrow over to math print, press enter, clear to get out of that screen, and you put in things like the square root of 7, it's going to give you simplified answers. In this case, the square root of 7 is as simple as it's going to get, rather than giving you decimal approximations. Another great thing it does in this mode is it'll reduce fractions for you. Love that. Like for, I don't know, example, if I had the fraction 12 over 15 and just press enter. Ooh, reduced fraction, like a mathematician. Math print mode, super useful. Other mode that you need to be able to flip between is normal and scientific. So I'm going to say 99% of GED problems, you want to be in normal mode. However, if you get a problem where you have to convert to scientific notation or use scientific notation and other type of numbers, you can go ahead and be in scientific mode. Arrow over Sci, press enter to select, clear. And now if I were to type any kind of a number, it would turn it into scientific notation here. And then I can use this mode as well to do computations. With numbers in scientific notation, it would be easily done in this mode. Next calculator skill I want you to have is computations with rational numbers. Don't get freaked out by the language here, guys. This is usually what we call basic math. So I'm talking about negatives, fractions, decimals, and when I say computations, I just mean adding, subtracting, multiplying. Let's learn to type in a couple of examples. Okay, so fractions. This guy does fractions. N over D button, you love it. Type that N over D button. Use your arrow keys to navigate around. So I'll type 1 on the top in the numerator, 4 on the bottom in the denominator. Now be really careful. Don't keep typing down here in the fraction because this sucker's in math print mode. It's going to behave like a mathematician. And mathematicians know that you can have entire expressions, entire what you guys think of as math problems down in the denominator. So I'm going to go ahead and delete those two. But I've got to make sure to arrow out of the fraction before I select plus and then a fraction again and 3. Navigate with the arrows, fifths, press enter. And I get this fraction 17/20. Look at example 2. Now, important to be able to read example 2. That says -7 minus -56. How do I know that it's a negative? Because it's in front of a number or it's inside that parentheses with that number. The parentheses are used to put the negative with the 56, so you know it's -56. And then how do I know that that other one is a minus? It's because it's between the two numbers. Now, you might say, well, who cares, Kate? You've told me before that minuses and negatives, kind of the same thing, not that big of a deal if you mix them up. But it is a big deal in your GED calculator because this calculator's a little dumb, honestly. It doesn't know. So important that you know the difference yourself. The negative key is down here by enter in parentheses. I'm going to use that for the -7. And now what am I doing with that next number, that -56? I'm subtracting it. So I'm going to put minus. And this calculator has the parentheses, so if you're not sure whether or not you need them, just include them. Just type it exactly the way you see it. So minus, I'll open my parentheses and say -56. Close parentheses, press enter. Oh, you guys, I did the thing I always warn my students not to do. If you turn it into scientific notation, don't forget to get it back out. Ooh, fired mode. Let me get out of scientific notation by going back to normal, clear, and let's try that again. -7 minus, open up parentheses, -56. I'm leaving that in the video. Y'all need to know math teachers make mistakes too. And we get 49. Here's another thing you don't have to know how to do by hand. Every single time percentages come up on the GED, whether it's science, social studies, or math, it's on the calculator section. Hey, and guess what? Your GED calculator has a percent button. Let's take a look at an example of that. If I were doing 15% of 162, you can just literally type in 15 and then the percent button. You don't have to know how to convert. Lesson that when we're scaling, that's an act of multiplication. So 15% of 162 is scaling 162 back. And so I am going to multiply when I see 15% of, and I'm going to multiply that by 162. Scale 162 by 15%. And there you go, 24.3. Next important calculator skill I want you to know is how to input exponents, also called powers, into your calculator. Maybe I should have made this number too because the GED loves exponents. But let's look at a couple of these examples. They look a little ugly. Don't be scared. We can input these. So first example, 4 squared minus 5 cubed, or 4 to the second power minus 5 to the third. So I'll type in the 4. And then there is a shortcut button to get to the square or the second power. It looks like x squared over here on the left. You type that. I really like that button because after you type it, you'll notice your black box is blinking there on the ground, ready for your next number. So and then I'm going to go ahead to minus 5. And then if I want to type in any exponent that's not 2, I have to use the caret key. It looks like a little arrow pointing upwards. It's right above the x squared. And then I can type in the exponent there. But notice when I type there, I'm still in the sky. So like if I had a more complex thing, I could keep typing, but obviously I do not. So let me delete 8 and 9. So 4 squared minus 5 cubed gives me negative 109. And then the next one, pretty tricky. Notice that I'm taking the square root of not just 9, but 9 minus 5. See how that square root, that radical, covers all of 9 minus 5? It's really important that you're in math print mode right now in order to do that. Now, take a look at square root. It's down here on the left in green. It's not a button, it's above a button. Anytime you want something green, you need to hit that green second key first. So I'll hit the second key, and now I'm able to select square root by hitting the button underneath it. And I can type 9 minus 5. Now, this is where my radical ends. The line on top ends. And so it is important to arrow out of this to type the rest of this expression. So the rest is plus. Now see that little 3 tucked inside the radical of this one? That means it's not a square root, it's a cube root. And so I don't need the square root key. I need the what we call xth root. So it's right above square root, again in green. See how it has an x in front and then the square root symbol? Again, since it's green, I'm going to need to hit that green second button. And now I can get the xth root. And you see I'm blinking up there in the sky, so I can type in 3, arrow into the radical, and type in 8. And now enter, and I get 4. I want you to be able to do conversions, moving back and forth between equivalent, so equal, forms of the same number. So this happens a lot in algebra. You'll get to the final step of solving an equation and you'll have what looks like a division problem, like for example, 24 divided by 36. You go to do it in your calculator and you don't get the form you were expecting. So imagine I did that. I did 24 divided by 36 and I got this long decimal answer, and then I look at my multiple choices and oh no, it's a fraction. So quickest, easiest way to go is just to do the quick convert button, which is right above enter, and hit that and it'll give me the next most common form of the answer. So there you go, quickly converted it to 2/3. There's another way to do it. So yeah, you could do 24 divided by 36, enter, and then the convert buttons always have those arrows. So up here by the arrow keys, it says in green, F, arrow, arrow, D. So that's the button to convert back and forth between fractions and decimals. Again, it's in green. So I'll hit second and that, hit enter, and that's another way to do it. That's a little harder though. I like that quick convert button. This one is going to make you guys so happy. So you can input entire expressions into the GED calculator, meaning basically it'll deal with the order of operations for you. Looking at a couple of examples here, these are some complex expressions with a lot going on. And yes, you could simplify them by doing one operation at a time using the order of operations, but you could also just type them into your calculator in entirety, just like this, and it will do all the simplifying. And it is programmed like a mathematician. It knows the order of operations. All right, let's try this first example. The sum of 45 and 30 divided by the product of 3 and 5. Look at me sneaking in that math language. But notice that I have an entire expression on top of the fraction. I have a sum, the sum of 45 and 30. So I'm going to type my N over D button first so that I can put that sum on top, and I'll type 45 plus 30 without navigating out of the numerator. Now I'll go down, or you can also use the right arrow, into the bottom, the denominator, and I'll do 3. And I'm going to do it exactly the way they do it with parentheses. In this particular case, a times sign would have done the same thing, but sometimes students get mixed up about when those are interchangeable and when they're not. So the safest thing to do is just when they use parentheses, you use parentheses. And hit enter, and look at that, it did all that math for you. This is going to be particularly useful when it comes to slope. Next example. Ooh, that looks ugly. 2 cubed minus the square root of, well, I'm going to say the quantity of, because there's so much going on, the quantity of 5 squared minus 4 times 4. Woo, let's do it. So 2, remember to get any exponent other than square, you're going to have to use the caret button. So get up in the air for the third power. And then remember to arrow out before you hit minus so that you're not typing all that in the exponent. So I'll arrow it out. And then I can hit minus, and then I want that square root. There's no number tucked in the little check mark, so it's the regular square root. So again, square root's in green, so I'll hit the green second button. And then square root is right above x squared, so I'll hit that x squared key. And then I can type 5, and again, squared this time. And I'll just use that shortcut x squared key, minus 4, parentheses 4, and as long as I don't arrow out, you watch that radical grow with me like I needed it to. And enter, and oh, that one's 5 too. Apparently all answers here are 5. So those were the crucial skills, but there's some other useful ones I'd love to tell you guys about. So first one is substitution. This is a skill that is very important in algebra that you will need to know how to do by hand for your college classes. But as far as the GED goes, your calculator can do it. Take a look at these examples. Now, don't panic that it looks gross, but take a look at example 9. It says, evaluate negative 2x cubed for x equals 3. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh my gosh, it's algebra, but it's not really algebra. We know what x is. We don't have to solve for it. It's not remaining a mystery. They tell us x is 3. And so really all that they're asking us to do is do this math, negative 2x cubed, with the number 3 for x. They want us to substitute a 3 for the x, and your calculator can do it. The key here is to know what to do first, and what you need to do first is store this value for the variable. They told you that x means 3. You need to tell that to your calculator. So to do that, you'll just type in the number first, 3. And then you'll use the store button over here on the bottom left, STO with the arrow. That tells your calculator to store this. And then right above that button, there's a variable button. You hit it once, you get an X. So what you're saying to your calculator right now is I want you to store the value of 3 for the X. Press enter, it returns a 3 to tell you, yes, I did. I stored 3 as X. And now you can type in the expression exactly the way you saw it. You do not need to do the substitution yourself. So what did it say? It said negative 2 X, I'll type in that X using that variable button. And then to cube it, like it said, I'll use the caret, press cube, and press enter. And your calculator puts in the right value for X for you, deals with the negatives, does all the computations. Boom. Nice. Super, super useful for a lot of problems on the GED. And the really nice thing is you can store more than one variable. So look at this next example where they'd like us to evaluate 3ab squared for a equals negative 1 and b equals negative 2. So first thing again, store the values for the variable. So negative 1, I want to store, I press the store button. Now all the variables are on the same button, okay? So I'm just going to press this variable button as many times as I need to get to the letter I want. So I want A. So let me start typing X, Y, Z, T. There's A. And I'll press enter to store it. And now I don't only have an A for this one, I also have a B. So I'll put negative 2 and store that and hit the variable button until I get B, enter. Now that I have my variables stored, now I can type the entire expression. So the entire expression was 3A. Now be careful. I just got an A. Now a lot of students would be like, now I got to hit it again to get the B, but look what happens. It changes my A if I do that. So when you get to the letter you need, A, go ahead and use your arrow button. And now I can hit it again and it won't affect the last one. And I can get to B, and what was it? 3AB squared. I'll hit the square button. That's the easiest way. And boom, -12. This is a very, very, very important button because a lot of students make really big mistakes when evaluating expressions with negatives. And the GED knows that, so they almost always put negative numbers in, knowing you guys make that really common mistake. So if you know how to do this in your calculator, you can avoid that really common error. If you're still tracking with me, I'm impressed. You guys are in it for the long haul. Next thing, though, I want to look at is scientific mode. This one might not even come up on your test, so if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're okay. You can skip it. But sometimes you have to do scientific notation. It's most likely to come up on, no surprise, the science test. So if you see a number in scientific notation, either in the answers, the multiple choice answers, or in the question itself, such as we see in example 12 here, that's a really good sign for you that you should flip to that scientific notation mode that we were talking about. Let's go ahead and try these. Okay, so scientific notation, we want science mode. Go ahead and hit mode, arrow down to that second line, over to sci, enter to select, clear to get out of that. And now when we type in that first problem, so 35,403, careful not to type commas into your calculator, times 678, enter, you're going to see that it displays the answer in scientific notation. And yeah, you'll have to do some rounding to find which one of these is the right answer, but boom, it did the conversion for you. So it did the multiplication and the conversion. And it's also the easier way when you're in this mode to go ahead and do the next example. Now, it might look scary to you, but notice how that big, ugly scientific notation number's in parentheses, and that's shoved up against another parentheses. These two funky looking numbers are multiplying. And again, though, I am definitely going to use parentheses when they use parentheses so that I don't get all confused. 8.1, parentheses, 8.1, and I'm going to use the lovely times 10 to the n button up here at the top middle instead of the times key and the 10 key. It's a shortcut way to do scientific notation. And then I have the 2. Now, again, make sure you arrow out of the sky before closing your parentheses, opening it back up, and typing the second number, 1.3 times 10 to the third. I'll arrow out and close my parentheses just for cleanliness sake, and press enter, and boom, there's my answer for that one, again in scientific notation. Now this time I'm not gonna forget, guys. I gotta get out of scientific notation before I set my calculator down, or else the next time I use it I'm gonna be so confused. I will hit mode, arrow down to the second line till I'm blinking on norm, press enter, clear to get out of that. And now if I type in a number, it's a plain old number. This one's definitely not necessary, but it sure is handy, especially when you're solving the kinds of equations that come up when you're using the GED formula sheet. So let's learn about the answer button. Don't panic again about the algebra, but we're just going to practice the calculator skills that go on here. So when you're solving these equations, a lot of times what will happen is you'll end up having to take square roots of some pretty ugly looking numbers. So this is the example here we're going to look at, and we're just going to practice the calculator work. So look at the right-hand side of that equation. The left s squared part might look scary to you, but on the right-hand side of the equal sign, not too bad, right? That's math we know how to do. We know a fraction bar means the same as divide. So what I'm going to type is 5.4 divided by, and you might say, Kate, can't I use the fraction bar? Yeah, you sure can. You'll get the same answer. But divided by 3.4. And you're going to see that I have this long, ugly, nasty decimal on my screen. Now, if I were doing this particular example, which again, you don't need to know how to do right now, we'll cover this in Unit 1. The next thing I would need to do is take the square root of this answer that I have on my screen. And this answer is pretty ugly. I don't want to write it all down. I don't want to type it all out. But if I lose some of the numbers, I'll lose accuracy and I could actually get a wrong answer. And so the nice way to do it is to use the answer button. So since I want to take the square root of this number, what I would end up doing is hitting second and square root. And you say, why square root, Kate? Again, we'll cover that in Unit 1, I promise. But just trust me that this skill will be necessary, where you have to take the square root of an ugly decimal. So square root, and I want to do that answer from before. So down here at the bottom, right above the negative key, we see in green ANS. That stands for answer. So I'll hit the green second button anytime I want something in green. Hit the ANS button and you see it says ANS on your screen. So that's saying it's going to take the square root of your last answer. Press enter and there it is. Now, that's not the only way to do this. You can also just navigate up to a line before. So you could have hit second square root and then navigate back up to the number you want. When it's black, hit enter, and that's another way to use an answer from further up in your calculator. So that's one of the reasons I'll tell students, don't hit the clear button. This calculator will keep lots and lots of lines, and they might come up for you on these multi-step problems. So if you don't clear, you can always go back and take a look or go back and select something. And so that can come in handy. You guys often will clear things out like you're so scared of the last problem. Don't do it. We might need it later. This final skill comes in particularly handy when you're doing quadratic equations, which again, you'll see in Unit 1. But that is the fact that you can copy and edit a line of your input in your calculator. So I want you to imagine that you had put this example into your calculator, but you put it in wrong. Imagine with me that you accidentally typed 75 plus 4 times negative 5. And then you looked back and said, oh, there's a mistake. Now, you could retype the whole expression out again. Certainly that would be fine. But when you have longer ones, it would end up being a lot of work. So one thing you can do is just arrow up to the expression like I did here. When it's black, hit enter. And then you can navigate around in it to modify or insert things that you've forgotten. So I'm just going to go over the plus, hit a minus instead. It'll replace that and enter. And then I have the correct answer there. Awesome. You did it. We did it. Way to stick it out. Now don't forget to go practice.